Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of Inside the Comedy Institute. The Comedy Institute, obviously, my school, and this is this is the show that I've always wanted to do. And in fact, it's one of those things like this is the podcast I've always wanted to do, and I never really thought about it. And then things recently, Adam Hunter, a very good friend of mine, kind of made a little history here, and I was like, you know what? If we're going to do this, there's no one else I'd rather start this process with than one of my best friends in stand-up comedy, one of the best comedians in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adam Hunter, everybody. Woo!
Oh, thank you, Greg. I feel the same way about you, plus more.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Now, for those of you listening to this and watching this, Adam Hunter's credits include 2 appearances on The Tonight Show. He was a finalist on Last Comic Standing, creator and host, and lets me sometimes be one of the co-hosts on the wildly popular MMA Roasted podcast. And recently, and this is why things have really been popping off for you lately, you became the first comedian ever to have a 1-hour special produced and broadcast by UFC. Which, I mean, when you think about how popular the UFC is and how many comedians have tethered their careers to MMA and the UFC, for you to be the guy, it is a hell of an achievement. Congratulations,
thank you, man.
brother.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Now, listen, let's start with this. Now, what style of comedian would you say you are?
I'm definitely like a throwback style, a joke teller. I've always, when I started doing comedy, I used to go to the Comedy Cellar and watch like the guys like Jim Norton and the Pete Corellis and even the Colin Quinns and the Godfreys, and it seemed like whoever got the most laughs did the best that night. Like the
Absolutely.
Rich Voss.
Yeah.
So I kind of was like, well, if I could just get the most laughs per set, then I could have then I could be the best comic of that night. I could be the best comic I could. So I love guys like Rodney Dangerfield. I love Mitch Hedberg. I love joke tellers. I love Chris Rock, and I love guys that just, I kind of base my comedy on like a Mexican boxer. Like you never see a boring Mexican boxing match. Very rarely. Right. It's just 2 guys just throwing thousands of punches per round. And the crowd is just like, and even if like half of them don't hit, there's just more coming, Right. And I was like, you know what? I would love to have a comedy style like that. And especially because a lot of the times, it took me a long time to get into certain clubs, but I would just do comedy anywhere and everywhere. And a lot of times, like the places I do comedy didn't even want to have comedy. It would be like at a bar.
That's a lot of it to begin with, for sure.
It would be a bar, or it'd be a rowdy place, and you have to get to the punchline. Yeah. Otherwise, they're not going to pay attention. They're going to talk. They're going to have this. They're going to that. So I just I also have ADHD, and I get bored with my own stories. Like I'll start the story, and I'll be like, let's get to the fucking punchline already.
Yeah, like, exactly. Like this is taking too long. Can we move on?
Like I mean, I've been in sets where I'm like, start a joke. I'm like, I don't want to tell this. This takes too long to get a laugh. Like,
right. So, you want to get there.
Yeah. So I'm like a setup punch, sort of a throwback comic. I think comedy has like went in different shifts where it became, for a while it was like the story, like kind of like what I'm doing, and then like the Borscht Belt punchline, set up punchline. Then it kind of evolved into like alternative comedy with storytelling. And I think a lot of comics they just jump on waves because they think that's what the crowd wants to see, versus just sticking true to what you like to do. And even if it's not the popular thing at the moment, if it's true to what you like to do, people will then come to it. And I do have some stories in my act, and I definitely have been, writing more stories. I just think that a lot of times, like, not to put that on other comics, but you just see where the editing could be. It's like,
no, absolutely. As a comedy coach, that's like 80% of my job is teaching them how to edit,
Yeah.
Because they feel like they have to keep all of it. And it's like, this is wasting everybody's time, especially your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you mentioned specifically Rodney Dangerfield, and there are guys like Stephen Wright. I mean, these are joke writing guys. These are guys who wrote incredibly funny jokes, and it does hail back to more of a 50s era type setup punch comic. which I love, which I love, and and like you said, I think there's room for all these, and people do chase whatever they see doing now. Do you think that people give your style of comedy enough respect currently?
I think that people like to write off other people, and I think it's based on insecurity, of their own insecurity. You know, they'll see a guy killing and they'll go, "Oh, he's dirty,"
Right.
or "He's a dirty comic," or they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, he's only killing." You know, Carrot Top is a prop comic. Oh, he's a prop comic. You know, they don't realize that like he's the best prop comic. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there trying to do what he does, but he's
Yeah.
making $20 million a year in Vegas, and they're not. You know, and I think that like, oh, you do one liners. Like, well, I think there's like a lot of like ways to dismiss other comedians who are not like themselves, because it kind of makes themselves feel better. And I'm guilty of that too, depending on what mood I'm in. You know, so I'm not going to be like I'm holier than thou, because I've done it too. You know, but I think that, you know, as I get older and I realize like maybe a little wiser, wisdom comes with age. You go, okay, yeah, but what are they doing? Like, what are they really saying? And it's one thing if it's like, not saying that like there aren't good fart jokes, but if I just did all, 20 minutes of fart and dick jokes and had a whoopee,
You'd be doing my act.
a lot of people, but people probably wouldn't even laugh at that. They would just be like, "What is that?" So, it's one thing where I think a lot of comics are, it's not like one style is better than the other. It's just a matter about being more and more effective. I think that the internet and social media sometimes has become, well, I gotta send a message, and I gotta make a point, and I gotta be on the right side of history, which is great. That's great. But are you getting laughs? Also,
Yes, absolutely. That is ultimately the goal. Ultimately, it is stand-up comedy. It's not stand-up philosophy. It's not stand-up moralizing. It's not stand-up, pontification. It is stand-up comedy at the end of the day. I mean, not that you can't do those things. You can, so long as they get laughs.
It's a comedy club. There's the word comedy club in it. It's not just club. It's not, and I think that some people, and I've done it too, where I'm like, I gotta send a message. I'm like, great, but people also want to laugh. And also when you could also send a message while laughing or while being funny. And I think it all has to come from the heart. I think unfortunately for me also, it's just because people like they want me to teach a course for like middle school kids recently, and it's hard to do because it's hard to tell anybody what works. That's what people like. People ask me all the time, like, "Hey, have any advice for comedy?" I'm like, just start doing it, and eventually things just kind of hit you. But every rule has been broken in comedy as far as success.
That's absolutely right. Yeah,
you can't be an observational comic. Well, Seinfeld did pretty fucking well. You can't be a dirty comic. Well, I think Richard Pryor is pretty dirty. Clean comedy sucks. Well, tell that to Gaffigan and his, multi-million, or let's, you can't be, you got to be honest up there. You got to be totally honest. Judah Freelander doesn't have a word of honesty in his act. It's about how he's the greatest of all. That's the act, is how he's better than you at everything,
Right.
So every rule isn't broken, but they all have jokes and they're all funny. They're all funny people. So it's hard to tell anyone what they can or can't do, because you don't want to lead people. I mean, don't have notes on stage. I mean, Janine Garofalo, that was her whole thing. I mean, was having, no, you're
100% right about that. At the birth of alt comedy. Yeah. It was all about having the notes, and
I mean, don't sit on the stool. Patrice fucking sits on the stool. The problem is that people see other people do it and well, but don't see the work that went into it. And then they go, "Oh, well, I'll sit on stage. Patrice did." I'm like, yeah, but you're not Patrice, and you're not Janine Garofalo, and you're not, so, but it is what it is. I do think that people are quick to dismiss other comedians, especially comedians. And I don't, it just comes from a place of,
it comes from jealousy. I think it
Jealousy,
always,
envy.
almost always comes from a place of jealousy, of envy. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that's what I have to check myself about when I'm like, just when I'm watching something like, I can't watch this anymore. I have to be like, okay, are you not watching it anymore because you're jealous of it, or you're not watching it because you're not enjoying it? And normally it's a healthy mix of both.
I mean, but there's also a lot of times we could see what they're doing.
Yeah,
It's like a magician who could see who watches like when David Blaine first became the comic. Other
yeah,
magicians could see that, you know. So it's like when you saw, I know a lot of times when like you see certain comics and you see who they're taking from, who their
yeah.
influences are. You see certain comics like, oh, they're just doing a Dane Cook and they're putting in Brian Callen there, and then they're putting in this comic there, and then you're like, oh, it's just almost like a paint by number of success. But it, you know, it really is what it is. I mean, there's really enough lanes to go around, and like you said, you know, I wasn't getting the love from other areas, from, you know, this company or that network, so I created my own lane, and then the UFC produced my own special. And you know, I think that's one of the things that like I've learned, and that you kind of have to create your own lane, because when you stand on the line of people that have done everything that way, you're just another number on that line.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and your number might not ever get called. I mean, look at when we were coming up, it was like, you know, send a tape to a booker, bother them for fucking years to watch it, then audition for Montreal, schmooze, get called back, hopefully get new faces, hopefully get a development deal off new faces, see how that works, hopefully get a sitcom, hopefully, and then all of a sudden, like, those days were over. And it's about creating your own lane.
That's amazing, dude. That's exactly right. And a lot of people are saying that it's about being creative and creating your own stuff. I mean, even Issa Rae, you know, her show Awkward, you know, she created that originally as a web show on YouTube, and it was her thing, and it was about her, and it took off. I mean, it seems like nowadays your commitment to what you really want to do your way is more important than ever.
I mean, Adam Devine, you know, I remember Adam Devine would ask for guest sets when I was headlining at
Yeah.
Moondoggers. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden, I'm like, how's it going? He's like, great, man. Me and my buddy's got this sketch troupe. And I'm like, oh, good luck with that. And then all of a sudden, Workaholics became the biggest show in the country. It was like
Yeah.
huge. And Adam Devine
Huge.
hasn't looked back since. You
Yeah.
know, I think the days of having somebody else like push you, be like, oh, he's the next thing. I mean, that's still around,
That is still around. Yeah.
but a lot of it is now like, what have you done on your own, and then what could we take and then take credit for it, you
Pretty
know?
much. That is a lot of it too. Yeah. They want you to build the whole audience, and they show up and go, oh, we got this guy who has this huge audience.
Dude, Bill Burr used to have a joke about that, how women, it was like, he said, like, you would run a marathon for 27 miles, and then you cross the finish line, and all of a sudden everyone's like, we did it, and everyone's
Yeah.
cheering. You're like, wait, like, where the fuck were you the 27 miles? Like, that's kind of how, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sold the same show, Kamikaze Comedy, and then one person makes one tweak. I think at the end we're gonna all go raise our hand and see who we thought was the funniest person. Like, and I have to go, okay, and then they put executive producer.
Right. Right.
You're like, what? You know, but you know, it is what it is.
The business part is hard. It's very tricky.
It is. I mean, that's what, like, the thing is, the 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 only justice is what happens on stage. That's the only
Yeah.
justice. I
Boy,
mean,
well said.
you know, because like when you're on stage telling jokes, you tell a joke and you get a laugh, it's the most pure form of entertainment. It's it's so quick, it's so pure. You're not editing, you're not paying the crowd to laugh. You're not like sending it to a fucking editor and he's color correcting it and then, you know, fixing it in post. It's you and the crowd and whether they laugh or not. And I know you, man. I mean, how many times, Greg, have I watched comedians who have, like, let's say, bigger credits at the time than you, and they have to follow you, and there's a certain like, I hate to say evil joy that I get and that you get from knowing that they haven't put the work to get to where they are, and now it's gonna all pay, and now it shows. You know?
Yeah, it is. It is an evil joy to watch them struggle. You know, and it's like, yeah, there it is. The truth is the truth. You know, you can't fake what happens with the crowd.
Yeah, that's the best. Honestly, like that's because that's like the crowd doesn't care. They'll give you a minute or two.
Yeah.
What if you're famous?
Well,
But
and I talk about it a lot. I talk about celebrity leeway. I'm like, listen, the audience isn't going to give you what they give a celebrity, because they'll be like, well, I saw so and so at the Improv, and like he didn't get it. You know, he was just talking for like. I'm like, listen, he's famous. They already are confident that he's going to be funny. You don't have that leeway. You know.
Yeah, but we've also seen those same celebrities, like you see that with Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock or some of these other bigger names like Louis C.K. Like when they were gearing for specials, they'd be in the clubs. They'd be following the heavy hitters. They'd be going after the guys, the road guys. I mean, I remember Zach Galifianakis, one of the biggest comments he ever gave to me was like, dude, he goes, I'm never following you again. He goes, well, then he goes, do you do the road a lot? Like that was also kind of an underhanded thing. But I was like,
right. Saying you must be out. Yeah.
But the thing is that then when you see their specials, the people who haven't been doing that, the celebrities that only do their shows, that only do their weekends, they only do that when they're the special event, and their specials suck because the crowd's not, because people watching TV aren't the ones that paid to see them. They're just flicking the channel and they go, oh, let me check this out. They go, why are people laughing? Because they weren't there, because they didn't do the work.
Yeah.
You know, you see, like that kind of happened with Amy Schumer, I think, where I think her special after that was better, but she got used to being Amy Schumer. And like I remember hearing a story from Tony Rock, actually, that when Chris Rock left Saturday Night Live and became the head of In Living Color, they gave him the head writer, and he went and bought a huge house, and it got canceled after 3 episodes. Like that was it.
He caught it right at the tail end.
So then he went back on the road, and he had to follow Martin Lawrence. They were co-headlining. And this is when Martin was doing like, Def Jam and the House Party movies and bigger. And every night, I remember Tony telling me he was backstage with Chris, and he thought like a bomb went off. Like, and they're like, "What happened?" And it was people laughing. Like they thought they were backstage hearing Martin bombs were going off.
Right.
And then Chris Rock went on after him, and it did not go well. He's trying to be all cerebral, Chris Rock was like, I remember they talked about it on the Chris Rock show, and Martin was like, and Chris Rock still was like, yeah, what opening act does an hour and 20 minutes? Like he was still mad about it.
He was still hot. He should have flipped it. If he was smart, he would have flipped it. But I guess sometimes one name is just bigger than the other at that time. And so that's the way it goes. And you see it in music too, with some bands that can't follow the up and coming bands. I mean, you see it.
But then Chris Rock went underground. And that's when Tony Rock said, Chris learned the value of like each word in the act being important, not just like talking around jokes, each word. And then he came back with Bring the Pain, which to this day is still
one of the greatest comedy specials of all time.
I think the best. So had he not had that experience, he might not. It's like with Bill Burr. When Bill Burr, I remember I remember being in Vegas running into Steve Byrne, and it was when Beecher's Comedy Madhouse was the big thing. And
you're talking to the host of it.
Yeah. And Steve Byrne was telling me that Bill Burr had to follow him. And Steve Byrne was like at the top of his game. And it was like when Dane was really hot, and Steve had like high energy and yada yada. And Bill Burr got booed off stage. And he said he saw him that night. He was like depressed, gambling, like just miserable. Then like 2 weeks later, he did that thing with Dom Herrera in Philadelphia, that Opie tour.
Oh yeah.
And he just leveled the fucking crowd. And had that not happened to him, had that not had it, that he might not have acted that way,
No, you're
and
right. He might not have let the vitriol just fly out the way he did.
yeah. And then and that's the thing. That's the shitty part about comedy is that for every like 10 jokes I write, maybe 3 will work on stage, but that means 7 won't. And you got to sit there and just eat a dick for 7 fucking jokes, And, but you have to have those experiences, you have to have those bombs. You can't just have the highs. You can't be a baseball player and not know what it's like to strike out,
Yeah, absolutely. The old Babe
So,
Ruth,
yeah,
holds the record in home runs and strikeouts.
exactly. Exactly.
So let me ask you this. What is your thought process when you start crafting a joke? What inspires the joke and how do you get to the finish?
Sometimes it'll just be like something I'll say in conversation. Now I'll write down on my phone and then I go back. But a lot of times it's like I'll be on the road and I'll just start journaling of like, man, like today my nanny got COVID and then this happened and then that happened and that happened. So I write like 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, and then I look in there and I go, can we carve a joke out of there? It's like an ice sculpture, and then I just get rid of anything that isn't like joke worthy, and
Yeah.
then I go, okay, like here's a joke, and then it just either a joke there or it won't. A lot of times, like I'll be like, oh, I'll use it as like a tweet. I'll put it on Facebook or Twitter. And then so I have like 400 pages of jokes, and I would say 300 pages of those jokes are not finished. They're just ideas.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll go back to them. A lot of it is just timing. It's just like that's why I like doing the road because of the time I have to write those jokes. Because you have a baby and this and that. And sometimes it gets harder. But yeah, that's kind of like my process there. Because
It's interesting. That's a unique process,
like I'm
especially
not
for
one.
someone who's crafting jokes, shorter jokes, set of punch jokes, to see
Yeah,
that there's that much that's written out first and then stripped away to see if there's something that connects to a punchline. That's an interesting process. I never would have guessed that was your process.
yeah. A lot of times, sometimes it's just ideas I have, and I'm like, and I'm happy now. There's a phone, not like a pad. I don't have to go
Yeah.
searching for, you know. I like go back and I go and I really have to write them out clear because if I just write down like 3 words, I'll be like, what the hell did I mean there? I have to
Right.
actually
So you
write it
write out the
out.
full thought process.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you carve it down to basically one line and then the punchline.
Yeah, a lot of times that's what it is. Or it's like this is a good joke, but it becomes like Tetris, where I'm like, this joke is good, but it should go here on an already existing joke as a tagline.
Right.
Which sometimes that gets hard because people are like, I heard that joke. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't hear part 3 and 4. So
It's expanded. This is
yeah,
this is the deluxe edition.
right.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. And then a lot of times it's like with the news cycle, it just everything goes by so quick.
Yeah.
So you have to like update the joke that the election's next week. Well, the election was last week, and then is the joke still there? Is it still worthy? Like I've tried out to be on Colbert recently. They were hiring writers, and I had to write like 300 jokes for that. I didn't get picked, but a lot of those jokes were. That was actually in some ways easier
Yeah.
because I just looking through news stories. A lot of times it's like fighting with my wife or fighting with like what happened today, what drives me crazy. I mean, Seinfeld said comedy is anything that like moves you, so it's a lot of it is just how I'm feeling at the time. And then the best advice that I ever got when I got stuck writing, like whenever I have writer's block, Tommy Koenig actually told me it's like pretend you're auditioning for a therapist. So here's your therapist, and like please take me. Here's why.
Yeah.
And that's always like a good
That's
way to feel
clever. I
like,
love that. It's like
yeah,
you're auditioning for a therapist. So let me ask you this, okay? I want to go through a seminal moment in your career, really in any comedian's career that's getting booked for the Tonight Show. I want you to walk us through it. What led up to that happening? And then I want you to walk us through the moment of what you felt like when you, I don't know, did you get an email? Did you get a phone call? What that was like. So just lead us up to it and how it happened and what it was like for you.
Well, that was like, that goes all the way back from Last Comic Standing. Well, because the Bob and Ross were the bookers of the Tonight Show, and they were also the judges on Last Comic Standing. And when I first moved to LA, like the day I landed, they were like, "Want to audition for Last Comic Standing?" So I did, and I got to that night, like the callbacks for LA.
Yeah, the LA showcase. Yeah.
And then I didn't get picked. And then
Yeah,
I
that's about
auditioned.
as far as I ever got. I got that I think twice, 2 out of 3 times, and I never got beyond the LA showcase.
Then the next year I went back, and Bob and Ross, like I killed it. I had the set of the night, and Bob and Ross were like, "You're the next big thing." Like they couldn't stop singing my praises. And then I'm backstage, and they got me calling my dad and calling, celebrating and jumping up and down, and I'm almost in tears. And then I got a phone call like a week later saying, "You're off the show."
Jesus.
I said, "What do you mean I'm off the show?" Because I had left my manager at the time, and the manager was managing the host of the show. So he called me up, and he's like, "I had a long talk with the producers, and good luck, buddy." I didn't even know what he meant. And then they go, "You're off the show." So then they wouldn't let me audition the next year. And then Bob and Ross felt bad about that because they were there telling me how great it was. And it wasn't their call. It was just like the producers.
Right, exactly. Like, the judges are not actually in charge of anything. And they've had a lot of controversy over that.
Yeah, they pick 50 people, but only 35 get through, because then the managers and everyone, "Oh, we have a white guy, we have a black guy, we have this guy, that guy." So then they wouldn't let me audition the next year. And then the following year, I went and auditioned again, and I got through again. And I was like crying again. Everything was great. Actually, they made me go to Arizona to audition because I was pitching a show. I was pitching Kamikaze Comedy to NBC, and they're like, "Well, why don't you come out for Last Comic Standing?" I'm like, "Because you won't let me." They're like, "Well, come to Arizona." So I drive to Arizona. I get there. Same thing happens. Kill. Then I get a phone call saying you're off the show again. So at that point, I was like, "You know what? Fuck you guys." I called up the producer. I like left a really fucked up voicemail. I remember a kid from Kid and Play telling me to stop. I was like, "No, this is bullshit." And I pretty much was like almost gonna be like done with comedy. Then they called me up like a day before the finals, and they said, "Hey, do you want to come back on? So come to Vegas." So I like went to Vegas.
Now, wait a minute. Do you think that phone call maybe actually helped you?
No, because I actually knew I had like a connection that got me kind of back up. Like I went over everybody's heads, and then because of that, the producers really hated me. And then when I got on, I'm like, they're not buying who I am. I'm trying to be myself. I'm trying to be like a nice, humble person, like that I'm trying to actually be in the world. So I'm going to be the biggest asshole, and then maybe that'll pick me. So I'm like, I'm the best comic here. Everyone sucks but me. I'm the greatest. Now all the comics hated me, but they put me right through. And I had a good set. So I was going to be the villain. But then when I'm living in the house, I'm like, shit, now the whole world's going to hate me. So every time they interviewed me, I'd be like, well, they'd be like, "So what do you think about the show?" I'm like, "The show's great. I used to work with kids who had cancer at the Ronald McDonald House." I would always bring up me working with kids who had cancer, which I did, but it had nothing to do with the question. I'm like, they can't edit that around. So then they stopped interviewing me. And then finally, like, they stopped getting me food. It was getting ridiculous. And then they edited it away where they're like, "You're performing all tomorrow." I'm like, "Finally." And then I'd watch the show. They're like, "You're performing all tomorrow." And they cut to a different shot of me going like this. And then they cut to like Jeff Dye going, "Adam looked really scared." I'm like, "What? That was not, So anyway, Bob and Ross.
Well, and I've said this before, where, because people always ask me about, "Oh, should I try out for this? Should I try out for that?" And I'm like, yeah, you should. But keep in mind, when you fuck with reality TV fucks with you back.
Oh, 100%. No, and look, I was happy. Like that show, after that, I was never featuring again. I went to headliner, but it was a lot of like, come on, guys. The thing is that Bob and Ross were no longer the judges, but so they always felt kind of, I think, guilty a little bit about the first time they told me I was going, and like, but I had to. They're like, "Don't worry, we'll get you on the Tonight Show." You know, so that was what they told me. So then my dad, my manager, he kept on them, and then they had a falling out. They had a falling out like the next day. And they're like, "Hey," my dad calls up. He's like, "Tomorrow we're doing the Tonight Show," right? Like out of the blue. And I didn't even have like a set prepared. Like, no, they said I auditioned like 4 times for them, and I'm on the board, but I kind of didn't know what that meant. And they're like, "Tomorrow you're on the Tonight Show." So I needed to like run my set. Like I didn't even.
So
have
they just called you up. You're like, "You're on the Tonight Show tomorrow."
Yeah.
Nice.
They went over a couple jokes, but I needed to run my set. So I called up the Improv, and they're like, "It's Skylar Stone's night tonight." So Skylar Stone's a guy that like I gave so many spots to, whether it was here or there. He gave me some spots too. We were like friends, and he had running the night. I go, "Dude, I got to run my 5 minutes," and he goes, "Sorry, man, I'm booked, and I don't want to take away some of my time, but I'll get you on at the open mic. There's an open mic at 3:00 that I can make a phone call." So to this day, me and Skylar were. So then I call the haha. And I think it was Augustino, was like, "It's David Arnold's show. It's a showcase for his students." I'm like, "Great. They'll see me on the Tonight Show the next day. It's the final showcase." He goes, "David Arnold says, it's not about you. It's about my students. So you can't do 5 minutes." Right? I'm like,
"Oh my God.
Now I can't even do a fucking spot in town."
This is where comedy was pre-pandemic.
So then Jamie Masada gave me 5 minutes at the Laugh Factory, right?
Yeah.
So I did Kevin Nealon's show, and Kevin Nealon forgot my name when he brought me on stage, which I couldn't even like actually address because I was just running my 5 minutes, right? But that was cool. So then I get there, and Bill Maher is the guest, and it's me, and it's Bill Maher and me, and I was nervous. I was so nervous that I had so much. I remember being on Last Comic Standing, my armpits were so dripping that when I went like this, you could see puddles.
Right. Yeah.
So they took a hairdryer and blow dried my armpits before I went on stage. My shirt. When they gave me my shirt back, I missed a button. So when I went on the Tonight Show, everyone's like, "Dude, you couldn't even button your shirt." Like I actually missed a button.
You were actually off one button?
Yeah, I was off one button.
Oh my God.
So then, like this,
I remember that shirt. It was like a big blue, like powder blue shirt. Yeah. And I just remember watching it, going, "You didn't have time to get a shirt that fits." Like,
no.
I didn't realize.
That was the second time. That was my dad's shirt, because that's a whole. So then what happened was, Jay Leno says to me, "This is the easiest 5 minutes you're ever gonna do, right? Easiest 5 minutes you're gonna do. You know, you don't have to do 100 jokes per minute. Take your time. You'll have cue cards." The hardest part was getting here. He was really nice. So they kept saying, "We're going to give you cue cards." I know my jokes, but I don't want to be like, "No, I don't want cue cards." You know? So I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I go out there, and Bill Maher's laughing at all my jokes. And they go, "Listen, when we go to commercial, pretend you're having a conversation with whoever, like that we like to, when they cut away, they want to see that you're having a conversation." So I sit down, and Bill was laughing. I go, "Hey man, Bill, thanks for laughing." He goes, "Laughter's not voluntary. I love your jokes." He goes, "But cue cards?" He goes, "I didn't have cue cards." And I don't want to be like, "Dude, I didn't want the fucking cue cards."
You should. I didn't want them either. Thank you. They were like, "We're gonna make cue cards." Oh,
so then he goes,
"Listen, that's still fine."
So then he goes, "Jay, when was the last time? Do you ever have cue cards?" Jay's like, "No." So then I was like trying to change the topic. I'm like, "Bill, do you still like doing comedy, right?" Which I don't know why he said that, but they told me to say something. So then you couldn't hear it. And Bill goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I wouldn't do it if I just didn't love it." But he goes, "It's easier when you have your own jet." So he told me.
That's true. I imagine that is true.
And I was like, "Well, I have an Uber X. I took an Uber X here. I'm trying to like." So then I thought that like after we were done talking, the mic was turned off. There was like a beautiful singer, this hot girl singing, and me and Bill were watching it. And I go, "Man, she's pretty hot." But the mic was on still. So you heard like, "She's pretty hot," like over.
Oh like, my God. Like the whole place.
Yeah. So that was the first time. But like I was super happy, super proud of myself. And there was a sense of like, because no matter who you are as a comic, and I talked to Chappelle about this, it never stops, man. I mean, you can be in every comedy club in New York, or you're not in the Comedy Cellar, you don't feel like you're a good comic. And then if you're not on the early show or the 8 o'clock show or the prime show,
exactly. You get in the club and then you want to be on the earliest show, and then you want to be the main spot on the early show. And
it's always, so there was something of like, man, I can't believe I'm doing the Tonight Show right now. Like there was a certain sense of like relief that I've actually like earned something, that it wasn't like, I knew somebody that got me somewhere.
Right. You really, you earned it. You impressed them and you got it.
So the second time they literally, so then the next night I did a cruise ship, right? I left for a cruise and I did a show and a joke bombed. And I go, just so you know, I did that joke last night on the Tonight Show. And then some lady in the crowd goes, I didn't laugh then either. And I was like, oh. So then, right?
That's a knife in the stomach right there, boy. Ooh.
Then the next time I did it, I found out the day of. Like literally, I'm on my way to coach wrestling practice. And my dad calls me up and says, hey, the Tonight Show they couldn't clear the Michael Jackson estate. They wanted the band wanted to play a Michael Jackson song. Michael Jackson's estate said no. They want you to do 5 minutes tonight. Can you get here in an hour? So that's when I drove to Old Navy, picked up a clean pair of pants, and then my dad brought me his shirt. I didn't have a shirt that was ironed. And then I get there, and normally they run your jokes, but they didn't even have time. They were going off the air in like 2 weeks. So I don't want to be like, hey guys, is it okay if I do this joke? Because I don't want to alarm anybody. But I'm going on the Tonight Show not knowing if any of these jokes are going to make it past, censors, So my first joke out there, I go, I love Asian women. That's why I hang out at traffic school. And they lowered the word Asian because that was offensive. So if you watch tape, all you hear is, I love women. That's why I hang out. So it's like, okay to offend all women, just not Asian women.
And really, I mean, it does hurt the joke. It kind of takes the zip off of it. I mean, the driving school thing is tied to a very specific cultural identity situation there.
But yeah,
that's crazy, man. What a time. Well, let me ask you this. Okay, so now let's get to MMA Roasted. Now, MMA Roasted, there are a lot of UFC MMA based kind of podcasts out there. This is one of the bigger ones. Now, about how many downloads at your peak? How many downloads do you see? What are you looking at now? Because it's changed platforms a lot of times, but you've done it for how many years, and about how many downloads are you seeing per week now?
I mean, we get about like 5,000 an episode. Sometimes we'll get more. Sometimes we get like 15,000. Sometimes you get less. It really depends. It's just like, we have like, somebody wrote a book, like 1,000 loyal listeners. Like all you need is 1,000 loyal listeners. Like we have our people that like love it. And it also, it definitely like, it's the brand. It's like, the whole thing was like an accident. I was opening up for John Heffron on the road and we were watching fights and he was like, he was hosting the MMA awards and he's like, hey, will you write me some sketches? So I wrote him a couple sketches and they went viral, me, him, and this guy, Joey Varner. And it was like, and then I ran into Dana White at a casino. We started talking and me and Dana hit it off really well. We talked for like a half an hour about fighting. I invited him to my comedy show and I pitched him a show in his office. And then he called me up one day and he's like, hey, I want to do these like Tosh.0 videos where you work for the UFC, but then they told me not to say anything. He didn't say it, but like, don't make it seem like you work for us. And then you roast the events for 2 minutes. But I would write like 50 jokes for every thing and only like 6 would make it. So now I'm like 44 jokes. I didn't make it. So then I just put them on a MMA Roasted Twitter account. And all of a sudden, like, it blew up to the point where now I have 80,000 followers on Twitter. But then that turned into, like, I've been writing the MMA awards for the past 13 years. And then I was the one that they asked back, really. And then I wrote like the Daniel Cormier All About the Cake video, and this year was the Henry Cejudo video, and these videos that got millions of hits. And then Fox Sports picked up MMA Roasted, and they wanted me to write this like fake group text chat called Text from Last Fight, where I pretended
That was
fighters
that was a funny one. Text from Last Fight was damn funny.
So then that became a thing, and then I wrote for Bellator for a while, and then I'm working for the PFL now, and I'm doing their events. And then, I kept pitching Dana things, and it was like 8, 9, 10 years in the making. And finally, during this pandemic, Dana called me up, and he was like, "We're doing your special. That's it. Fuck that. Well, I'm producing it." And they flew me in and did it. But it's been like a 13, 14 years in the making. And it's one of those things where like I'm just super passionate about it, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And if something like, if you enjoy like comedy, watching MMA jokes, coaching wrestling, like I would do them all for free, and I've done them all for free. So it's like if you get paid to do something that you do for free, you become a rich man, whether or not you're like rich monetarily or just rich on the inside. Like you don't age, you have fun. People always say, people always like tell me, "Hey, I want to do comedy. Can I make a lot of money?" Or, "Hey, I want." Most 99.999% of podcasts start and stop because people think they're going to get into it, make $1 billion like Joe Rogan, and then they realize no money's coming in and they quit. Yeah. And none of this was
stand-up in general.
Yeah, and my intention was never to become a millionaire as a comic or as a podcast host. It was to become a professional and become the best I can be, and then the money seems to come sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does.
Yeah,
But
I've often said about stand-up, I'm like, they pay us for the travel. We'll do the show for free.
Yeah.
You're paying us to come there and be there for a few days. I mean, really, that's what you're paying us for, because we love doing the show. The show's the best part.
It's the best part. It's like the only part. I mean, it's the best. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like being on stage and looking down and seeing people with tears in their eyes, laughing because you made them laugh, and you've brightened their day. I mean, I did a show in San Francisco a month ago. It was like a lesbian couple that came up to, and that's not really my demographic, is lesbian couples. I'm not exactly, not that I turn them away, but it's just not really. I mean, there's other, more comics that people gravitate to, but they came up to me and they're like, "Hey, listen, we have 2 special needs kids. We haven't been out of the house in 5 days or 5 months because of the pandemic. Thank you so much. We're fans of yours for life."
That's awesome.
But that's everything, man. It's like, like that's why you should do it. You should do it because you want to make people happy and can make yourself happy, and because you love it. I think the business sometimes makes it easy to lose focus on that. Like I tell people, like, it's hard. It's like, I mean, I'm in this hotel room. This is actually a nice hotel, but it's fucking snowing outside. I just drove 3 hours to a gig. I took flights, left at 5:30, lost my jacket in the airport because I left it. I got pulled over. I didn't have $1 to pay a toll. I didn't have cash on. So like, I had to fight with a rental. I got the wrong reservation on the rental car. I had to fight with somebody in India to get it taken off. I get here. I know I'm gonna have a good set. I think it's at a rock venue because the comedy club's closed. And then I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna be at a high, and I'm gonna turn on Instagram or Twitter and see people with like millions of things doing better than me, like technically. And then I'm gonna turn on the TV and see the guys used to open for me on their 3rd Netflix special. And it's easy to let that shit fucking get to you, But you got to be strong, and you have to know that, like, look, 2020 was actually like a great year for me. I got to spend all year with my kid, my daughter, and I got a special. I wrote the MMA awards. I headlined in Vegas. I traveled. I wrote a whole new half hour, 45 minutes. But it's really what you make of it. You just got to be strong. You got to be you have to strong. You can't, in my opinion, like you have to have goals and you have to like say, okay, I want this to happen this year, that to happen the year, but you can't plan it. It's like shit happens when you least expect it.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I mean, you were in movies with like major stars, TV shows. I remember talking to it was the guy that was in what's it called again? Mike and Molly.
Yeah.
The heavy
the heavyset guy. What was his name? The one that didn't wind up with, but now he's got I Heart Abishola or whatever.
Yeah, I remember opening for him in San Diego, and he had just done like a little part on. I think he was in Bad Santa. And he was like the mall cop. He had like 2 lines.
Yeah.
And he was getting all kinds of love for it. And he's like, Adam, I was in a movie with Stallone, De Niro, Al Pacino, Sharon Stone, and me. And I'm like, this is it. This is it. He goes, it went right to Blockbuster, straight to video, and nobody saw it.
Billy Gardell, that's his name.
Billy Gardell. Then he's like,
Yeah.
then I was in Bad Santa and had 2 lines. And everyone's like, great job, man. But he's like, it just, come on. You know?
No, I know. There's so many projects you're like, this is it. My rocket ship to the moon has arrived. And then it just blows up on the fucking launch pad.
But we've seen it, man. I remember when Dr. Ken couldn't get arrested in LA.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Like, I mean, people were like, not laughing.
You never know what it is. You never know what it's going to be. You never know what's going to be that one project that turns that key for you.
I used to do Bringer shows. Ed Helms was booking me on the Bringer.
Dude, exactly. Ed Helms he ran the open mic at the Boston Comedy Club. That was as far as he got as a stand-up. And then his agent, I guess, which was an acting agent, got him an audition for The Daily Show, which at the time, The Daily Show was, I mean, it was a funny, quirky little show on Comedy Central. But then the Bush administration, then 9/11, the Bush administration, and all of a sudden it took on this whole other importance, and he was right there in it. And that was it. We never saw him again.
Yeah, but then you see like the other side where like Dunkelman opened for me a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
Dunkelman, or like Barry Sobel, like
Dunkelman will sadly always be known as the guy who quit American Idol.
I don't know, man. He's a good dude. I think something could happen.
I'm not saying he's not a good dude. He's a great dude, and he's a fine comic. Nothing against him in any regards. I'm just saying, like, that's the big thing. Like, he was the co-host, and then for some reason he quit, thinking it was going to be trash, and it turned into a juggernaut. And now Ryan Seacrest is, a mogul.
Yeah, no,
but that's a way. But that's not to say we'll come around for Dunkelman. It could still be he could land on some show, and then it'll erase that, and it'll be known more for that. I mean, that's the thing. I find that this is a pendulum more than anything else, and the pendulum does swing. It just takes a really long time.
The thing is, you got to stay in the race. You know, I think even if you're walking and not, you can't quit. I think once you quit, I think. I don't know. I mean, I just think maybe
that's one of my favorite quotes, and I don't remember who said it, and I don't really remember where I heard it. I just remember loving it, which was, it matters not the length of the journey. It only matters that you keep going.
It's so true. I mean, it's so true.
Let's talk about, for some reason, people with you in particular. I've seen you a million times. I've watched, all of your clips. And it seems like, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about you. I don't know what it is about your style. Maybe it's because you have a rat-a-tat style, so there are obvious breaks. But people feel comfortable fucking with you. And it's unlike any comedian I've ever seen, especially one as good as you are. I can see it happening with comics that aren't very good, and so then I could see where people feel the need to be like, dude, you fucked up. But with you'll be crushing. You'll be crushing. And people will still feel the need. They'll be comfortable enough to start talking to you. Now, I'll also say you're one of the fastest comeback kings I've ever seen. I mean, it's like, shoom, shoom, you are right back at him every time. And 99% of the time it hits. What do you, when that starts, when that moment starts happening, what's going through your mind?
I mean, I think a lot of it is like, you know, a lot of the clips that I put up are like, you know, I do 100 shows and I put up to 3 times that like it happens. People assume that it happens more than it does. I mean, you being there though, yeah. I think a lot of it is the rooms that you've seen me in also are like the haha, where like Mexicans just love fucking, they feel very comfortable just yelling.
They feel
shit.
very comfortable just speaking right up. Yes. As a Mexican, it's true.
And the Dime Bar isn't even really a comedy show. It's a bar that we force comedy upon people. So like that doesn't happen at the Laugh Factory or like the Improv, you know? So I think a lot of it is where, but also I also entice it sometimes, you know, like I also fuck with people. Like if a guy has a hot girlfriend, I'll put him down in a way where I think it's like, you know, I'm pretty good at like going right to that line. And also a lot of times I like to win. You know, I don't want to just have a medium set. And if I know the crowd work is doing really well, I want to fucking crush, you know? And sometimes it's like, I remember Jordan Rubin telling me I would get a lot further if I just had mediocre sets all the time, because then people would want me to open for them. But like, I never had that mentality, you know?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to just crush. And I think a lot of times like crowd work, people love the crowd work. And the thing about the crowd work is it's unknown. You know, you don't know what's going to happen a lot of the times, especially when you ask questions. So,
especially when you ask questions, because now you're inviting them to start talking. And once you open that, sometimes you can't close it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say for the most part, but I also think that sometimes guys get a little bit like, they assume that I'm the guy that like fucked with them in high school. Or they want to prove to their girlfriend they're funnier than me.
Sure, there's a lot of that. Yeah.
A lot of times when you make something, I've been doing this 24 years. Like I started when I was 19, I'm 42. So a lot of times when you make something look easy, everyone thinks they can do it. Yeah. It's like, I remember reading Uta Hagen's acting book, is that like, you know, when someone's good acting, when you think you know the person, you're like, oh, I know who that person is.
Right,
like,
right.
And then you assume they're not acting, but that's when they're really good at acting, you know? And I think stand-up comedy is this kind of the same thing. It's like, you just think it's a guy fucking around on stage having fun, and you don't realize that's the craft. So because of that, you feel like, oh, if he's fucking around, I can fuck around too. You know? And also I think that maybe also my stories, like I don't tell a lot of stories. So I give people more like, there's more spaces. I never even thought about that, for people to kind of chime in.
Yeah, that's what I always thought. It was like, because they know the joke is, you know, that's the joke. And so that gives them that little gap to kind of get
I mean, I normally don't mind it that much. I only really mind it if it's like a showcase, or I'm trying to like
when you're trying to run a specific set and then they're interrupting it. Yeah.
Or if it's like a clean show on a cruise ship and I'm like, my hands are tied behind my back.
Yeah, they are. They sure are.
And then you start going, is winning this battle worth the $20,000 I'm gonna lose this month on the fucking cruise ship? You know, so you start like, you're not even in that moment anymore. Or, you know, I don't like it when someone's being a dick. Like when someone's laughing extra hard on purpose, or like they're obviously trying to be a dick.
Yeah.
You know, like they're not even
right. Yeah. It's sarcastic laughter.
That to me drives me crazy. Yeah. The sarcastic laughter. Or when they comment, like when they go, oh, that's racist, or that's sexist, or that's just, it's like this is not, you know, this is not a safe space here. You know, this is comedy. Like, and you're not even listening to the joke. You're hearing a word. You're judging the word and not the sentence or the idea or the joke. You know, it's like that to me is when I can't stand it. Is like when topics are off limits. You know, at least think about, it's like Pat Miletich got fired from his job. And I love Pat Miletich, but he went to that Trump rally last week and when they stormed the Capitol. He didn't do it, but he was in some pictures where people held up like, I don't know, white supremacy signs. So he got fired from his LFA job, right? And whether or not that's justified, that's you should know better than to know what people are doing in a picture of you, even if you didn't know. But I could see both sides. If you just showed up, you didn't cause any trouble, you just went to the thing, I could see why that wouldn't be a problem, and I could see whatever. The joke that I made was that Pat Miletich went to the march. It was the first time he did cardio in 4 years, right? That was the joke. Had nothing to do with him being fired, blah, blah, blah. And then everyone's like, oh, you're making fun of a guy who got fired? Like, or I said he got fired for going to the march for him to do cardio. Like, the joke of him being out of shape. Like, the joke isn't about him getting fired. People go, oh, you're a real classy guy making fun of someone they got fired. I'm like that's when I fucking lose my shit. It's like when Joe Rogan, like there was a guy wearing like fur. Remember that guy wearing fur in the Capitol? And I wrote, this is the next guest on the Joe Rogan podcast, right?
Which I thought was great. I thought you nailed it.
Joe Rogan liked the joke. Joe Rogan himself liked the joke. But then people on Twitter were like, you obviously don't listen to Joe Rogan podcast, or somebody's fucking jealous, or and they're like, when the guy that you're making fun of isn't offended and actually likes the joke, and you're offended on behalf of him, you're like, dude, like that's, to me.
Well, that's the thing. Being outraged seems to be our national pastime. It really is. It's the one thing all Americans seem to love to do nowadays, is just be outraged.
And people are always like, why are they making fun of Angela Magana? Because she's my friend, and like I always call her a whore in the jokes. She knows I'm kidding. She knows she's not a whore. She's like a friend of mine. I've like donated to her causes. I've helped her out because I know she won't get offended. But like, it sucks when you have to, like, you can't make fun of people because they're going to be like, other people are going to be offended on their behalf. Like, if somebody's offended because they're offended, I get it. If like Brittany Palmer made a joke about she got offended, I don't fuck with Brittany Palmer anymore, Right. But when people are offended on behalf of somebody else, it's like, oh, come on. It's like, I did a joke about, like, I go, this guy, Brandon Moreno is in a fight because Mexicans don't pull out anything or something, right?
Right.
And I looked at who liked the joke. It was like 50 Mexican people liked it. But one white guy with a fucking beard was like, that's right. I'm like, dude, like, this is why we can't have nice things.
Totally. Now, let's move to the lifestyle, because the lifestyle of the comedian it's a tricky thing. And there are some things that you can get right, and there's some things you can get wrong that ultimately can affect your ability to continue the journey all the way to the levels that you're at. Now, you recently had a daughter, and less recently, but still not that long ago, I want to say maybe 3-4 years ago, you got married for the first time. It wasn't like it was a second marriage. It was a first marriage. Do you think waiting till you were firmly established as a comedian helped you, or do you wish you had done it sooner?
It's not about being a comic. I think firmly established as a human being, like as like I think that like when I was ready to, I wouldn't say I got it out of my system, but like I had I had enough one night stands and enough threesomes and enough like dating strippers and porn stars and blah blah to know that was probably something I should not be involved with anymore.
I've told the story too. I one time I knew I was ready to finally settle down when I was sleeping with a girl on the road, and I remember having sex with her and thinking, oh well, yeah, I guess pussy's pussy. Like, I mean, it kind of, I was like, I kind of hit my limit. I was kind of like, okay, I'm all right. It isn't as exciting as it once was, and that's when the planes started, like all right, we're ready to land,
Dude, I had a girl that was a porn star. We slept together, and then afterwards, I was like, I gotta get back with my ex. But I said it out loud, like right after, right after I came. She's like, what? And I was like, oh fuck. I thought that was my inner voice.
You're like, I gotta get back together with my ex.
She like fucking was furious at me. I was like, that really happened.
You were that you would do this thing. You did have I will say this. You did have this pattern of you would get with a nice girl and try to be that guy for up to a year, and then the dam would break, and then it was, you know, porn stars. Because
I would like,
you know,
because I would save up. I would like be like, I had a mental checklist of every chick I could have fucked, and then try to like, you know,
go back and fuck them up.
Back. Yeah. Go back, and it never actually worked that way. But yeah, I think, you know,
no, it never does work that way. You always think like, as soon as I'm out of this, I'm going to go back. But the window closes. That time has moved on. Those people are not there waiting for you to be single again.
No, it's actually really unattractive to them, actually, that you're even trying. It's actually beyond
guys who are considering it, you know, that take heed.
It's like beyond it. And actually they get a lot out of saying no to you too. That's a big win for them.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh, I've seen that one. This girl had been coming on to me for a long time, and then one night I was like in her neighborhood. This is in New York, and I'm in her, and I got out of this relationship, and I'm in her part of town. I'm like, hey, what's up? She's like, hey, come on over. You know, and this is at like 2:30 in the morning, and so I go over, and they're just like, oh no, I thought you would want to smoke a joint. I'm like, you invite at 2:30 in the morning? You thought I just wanted to come over to smoke a joint? I was like, all right, but I could tell she was enjoying watching me be disappointed.
Oh yeah,
and walk out.
100%. That's happened to me so many times. Or like, or like girls on vacation, and then you buck her on vacation, and then you go to her town like 6 months later, and she's now in work mode. She's like, who the fuck, what are you doing? Like,
yeah,
I was on vacation back. But I think that a lot of times, I think there are a lot of people out there that they don't get it out of their system. They try to, they go and they don't do enough, and then they get in a relationship and they regret it and they cheat. And
I think that's a lot of people that get married very young. When you get married in your 20s and you're not thinking about how long life is, and and then all of a sudden, you know, it's so funny. One of the gals that I dated very young, she married. It happened to me a lot because I grew up in Dallas, and I started comedy in Dallas, and girls in the Dallas area are Southern girls, and they, you know, high school, college, marriage, family. I mean, it was a very simple, and a lot of times college didn't happen. It was high school, marriage, babies. Like, it was just this quick succession of things. And I remember talking to her when she was in her late, so she married the guy right after me. When she was like, we dated when I was like 21 or 22, and she was 19. Then she married the next guy. You know, she got married when she was like 20. And then we spoke, I guess, when she was like around, you know, 28, 29. And she told me she had this dream. And in the dream, she saw herself in the mirror, and it was like her younger self. And all she kept telling her was like, you can wait, don't get married.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's not a lot of subtext to that particular dream. That's kind of easy to read. That's like a headline. Like, you got to see exactly what it's saying.
Yeah, I mean, for me, also having a baby changed my life too. You know, it's like, you don't want to be the guy who cheats. I was faithful before the baby, but like, you know, when you have a baby, also, it's just, you just don't
really
want to
cements it.
Yeah, it really cements it, and also it's like, also you can't. I mean, Louis C.K. used to have the greatest show I ever heard. One of them, he goes, you know, when you're married, you think, I can't leave, and then you have a kid, and you're like, I could have left.
He also has a joke where he goes, guys, I'm a divorced parent. It's the best. Like, get married, have kids, get a divorce. It's the best way. And I was just like, oh God, that's not good advice either. But he did a whole thing about it, you know. So really quick, so let's talk about this for a second. What are or is, if you could find one moment that you would say is your best experience as a comic, could you, one moment, or that's just up there that you're like, okay, this was one of my best moments in comedy?
The two Tonight shows were good. the last comic standing, the final set, because the way they did it, were like, we have one comic left or something, and there was like three left, and like I knew I was getting voted off. It would make no sense if I was the guy who got picked, and then there was like two behind me. Like I knew I was gonna get voted off, right? Because it made no sense. So I was like, you know what? I could either like go out there and just have an okay set or whatever, or I could have the best set of my fucking life. I know I'm gonna lose anyway, and in some ways make it no one could follow me, and just fucking crush it. And I went out there and I had probably one of the best I've ever had, that final set, to the point where when they announced me that I was voting, everyone started booing, and they booed the next time after that. Like Brian Skellicom was like, dude, that was the best thing I've seen. He goes, they booed everyone else after you. They couldn't follow you. Like he was like, and I think that sometimes like it just reminds me of being a fighter, of like, hey, like you're down 9 rounds to nothing. It's the 10th round. You're gonna lose if you don't get the knockout. And you gotta just fucking go out. And like, and I remember my dad, when I wrestled, I made the nationals, and I was like wrestling the kid who took third in the nationals, and I was down like 7-3 or something, and there was I got impetigo the week of, so I couldn't wrestle. I had bandages everywhere. I would just sit out. It was just like I was up a weight class. I was down like 7-3. It was like there was like 20 seconds left, and I remember my dad watching me, and I just was like, "Fuck!" I just like threw myself at the kid. Like there was nothing I could do. I tried everything, and I just like jumped at him. And like my dad's like, anybody else would have, like a lot of people would have been like, it's over. You lost. He goes, but you still believed you could win. And I remember he had like tears in his eyes, because he told me that it was like one of the best things he's seen. He goes, you dove at this guy. And all the coaches like, and they knew you were gonna lose, but you just were like, fuck it, we're gonna keep going. And I think that's like something that I try to instill in like my kids when I coach them, and my daughter and my wife is like, yeah, you may lose, but just like know that you empty the gas tank,
Yeah.
And like and even like there are so many sets where I'm like, even with my special, I'm like, I'm doing a comedy special. Like we're in a pandemic. The room holds 200. There's 35 people. They're all wearing masks. Like 15 don't speak English. The guy in the front is literally banned from the UFC for fighting out of the cage, like Mike Perry. Like and there's like 6 people from like accounting there, But I'm like, I gotta give it my all. Like you just gotta empty it.
You gotta go for it. If I'm being honest, when I watched the special, I felt like it was about 10 minutes in that you finally started having fun.
Yeah.
I could tell, but again, I have the knowledge, you and I having discussed it already, knowing the challenges that you're up against, knowing, everything that the things you just described. And so knowing that, I'm now watching it, and I could tell over the first 10 minutes or so that you were you were feeling it out. You were delivering the jokes and stuff like that, but I could see you were not. Then one joke actually really connected and really got, for that room, an audible laugh. I mean, you were getting laughs. It's not that you weren't, but obviously it was muffled, and you were working through it, and you smiled. You finally smiled. And I was like, okay, he's fine.
Yeah.
He's got it. Now he's having a good time. He's in rhythm. This is going to be great, but I felt like there was that first 10 minutes where you were like, all right, let's do this. Okay.
I was like
you were like, bap, 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 bap,
This is exactly what happened. I mean, this is exactly what happened. Cause I was just like, all right, like we've seen this before, not this, but we've seen this, I think, and that's to anybody that's like your comedy people that are watching it. It's like, experience is really the best teacher. You know, it's like I could tell you how to write jokes, I could tell you how to this, and I could tell you how this, but until you're in there and you're doing it, that's unfortunately what happened with Nate Robinson when he got knocked the fuck out by Jake Paul, because he'd never been in there before.
Yeah.
You know, it's like experience is everything with comedy. It's knowing, like, and I mean, I've had menus thrown in my head. I've had people attack me.
Well, that was the next question. That's the next question. That's the next question, which is, what is your worst experience in comedy? I know you got a lot of, I mean, everyone has, we got a lot of good low points. If there's one that stands out as a bad show, as something really bad, what was it?
I mean, well, one of them was like the Montreal Comedy Festival. Like, they saw me 3 years in a row, and at the time it was the premier comedy festival. And they saw me like the night before at some Club Excess that Jay Davis and Ahmed Ahmed were running. Yep. And then the next day they called me up. My manager was like, they want to see you again. Like, they saw me yesterday. They want to see you again. When? Tonight. They saw me yesterday. It doesn't matter. So I get there, and like, I'm up second. The first comic doesn't show up on purpose. The host fucking bombs. The crowd, they bring in 30 old people, like on like a bingo trip, like a bus full of old ladies in the crowd. And I go up there, and I'm getting some laughs, and I'm like, all right, let's just treat this. We got to break these older people. So I'm like, oh, I like older women. And my joke was going to be like, because during sex, I'm like, who's your grandson? Like, that was the joke. So I go, I like older women. And some lady goes, I'm not old, and takes a menu, and not a paper menu, a hard ass thick menu, and just hurls it at my head and hits me point blank in the head with a menu, right?
Oh my God.
I'm like, what? And then there's a stun. The crowd's like, huh? I'm like, did you just throw a menu? And now I'm like, I have like 3 minutes left. I'm like, do I go back to my crowd work, to my jokes? And I'm like, why did you throw a menu at my head?
And the Montreal people are there.
They're there. And I'm like, oh. And then my head just like swole up, and it was like a fucking cartoon bump. And then that was like the end of that set. And of course, I didn't get Montreal that year. I mean, that was one.
Oh man.
There was another one where
sometimes you feel cursed. Sometimes
another one where my manager says, the Gersh wants to see you. Who? The whole agency wants to see you. I'm like, when? Tonight. What do you mean tonight? They're bringing the whole agency to come see you tonight. Where? The Westwood Brewing Company. I'm like, that's the club that I fucking started. I'm like, okay, well, what's tonight? It's the Friends finale, right? The most watched show of all time. So now I get there, and I walk around UCLA for 6 hours trying to get people to come. No, everyone's like, I'm watching Friends. Sorry. DVRs weren't even invented then yet. It was right. So then I get there, it's like 6 comics there to watch me bomb, and 19 agents wearing suits, like fucking pissed off they're not watching Friends. And it was fucking brutal. I bombed so hard. It was like 2 people in the crowd. Like, it was one of those things where I didn't address the situation. Like, I didn't say, listen, guys, if I would have said, look, I know you guys want to watch Friends. My manager sucks. I don't know why this is happening. I spent 6 hours today. These are the joke. Like, then it could have, I actually might have gotten them, maybe. But
well, exactly. That's hindsight 2020 when it doesn't go. Yeah. I mean, you obviously picked the game plan in the moment. You thought, just do the set. And then the set goes like that. And you're like, I mean, I remember, a career in comedy, in any art form, I imagine, but in comedy is littered with these moments. I remember one time doing like the first corporate event I ever did when I was still part of a 2-man act called, was it Greg and Lynn's or Greg and Greg at that point? I think it was Greg and Greg. And because I had 2 different 2-man acts. And so we're doing this corporate event. And I guess because it was like this community event, and it was their big Christmas dinner, and normally only so many people come to it, but because they were going to have this comedy act, all of a sudden everybody decided to RSVP and come to this thing. So they went from having like 1 room of people to having 3 rooms worth of people. And the catering wasn't prepared for it. The place wasn't set up for it. Like, so they had so many more people. So at a certain point, they just come up to us. I never get this. Woman goes, look, some of the people have eaten their food. Some people just got their food. Some people are still waiting on their food. Everybody's angry. Let's just start the show.
Oh my God. Dude. I did a NACO one time that went so bad. They booked one college booked me before the set. One, I got no bookings, and the college took their booking back. Like I would have been better off not going on stage. Like I would have got that college.
I've bombed. I've crushed like 2 of those showcases, and I bombed I think 4 of those showcases.
Yeah, I mean it's just. But that's the thing. It's like comedy is like it's like that scene in Indiana Jones where like there's no like he has to get to that skull and everything's like invisible and he finds these steps, but like that's like they make it so that no one can follow your fucking footprints, which is like great, but also hard as fuck, but I love it. So speaking of which, I got to get ready for the show.
Okay, right. I was actually going to ask the final question really quickly. Any advice for newer comics today?
Yeah. I mean, advice for newer comic is write everything down. To write. To not be afraid to pivot when it comes to technology. I think so many comics, like they just like, oh, I'm not doing Instagram. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. But like, imagine like how good you are if you actually did do that. I mean, you look at like Dane Cook and MySpace, like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, but Dane Cook was like 15 years into it when he had, and then all of a sudden it was like, boom. Whatever. But the most important thing is to be funny, to work on your craft, to do comedy anywhere. That's also the thing that helped me the most was that I didn't wait for people to book me. I booked myself because stage time is so valuable. So I created a comedy. I went to Gladys's and then it was Friday, Saturday, and I made it Monday through Sunday. And I ran Monday through Thursday and Sunday. And then I built Joe Franklin's. I literally built the stage at my house. And then I went out to California and I booked, I looked at the Westwood Brewing Company. I built a comedy club there. And then before you know it, I had Nick Swartzen and this one and Chelsea Handler and the Wayans brothers. And then I went to the Dime Bar. So you create your own stage time. And because that's, a lot of people will just give you 5 minutes or whatever. But when you're giving yourself 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you don't have to worry about bombing because you're giving yourself stage time. Yeah. So it's to build your own stages.
Absolutely amazing stuff, man. Well, thank you so very much. This has been the first episode of Inside the Comedy Institute. I love knowing you. I love being friends with you. We've been brothers for a long time, and it's an honor to have you as the first episode here on this show, man.
I love you, Greg. Thank you, brother.
Take care. Have great shows tonight.